نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. عن عبد الله رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم سباب المسلم فسوق وقتاله كفر، وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. رواه البخاري. Regarding our dars of Hadeeth, our halaq of Hadeeth, from the book of Muntakhab Ahadith under the chapter of Ikramul Muslim, the subchapter of the warning against harming Muslims, causing any kind of harm to a Muslim. Sayyidina Abdullah radiyallahu anhu, he narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Sibabul Muslimi fusuq wa qitaluhu kufr. That abusing a Muslim is fusuq, it is amongst the form of disobedience and sin. Wa qitaluhu kufr, and to kill a Muslim, it is kufr, it is a type of kufr and infidelity. وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. This hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. In the book of Muntakhab Hadith, this is hadith number 282 from that chapter of Ikram al-Muslim. There are a few points that should be made very clear about this hadith. When it comes to the abusing a Muslim, this is that type of abuse where it is in any form a type of disgracing the Muslim or causing harm. And as Muslims, we should avoid causing any kind of harm to a Muslim. In general, it should be avoided. And when it comes to killing a Muslim, and again, this is obvious, it is kufr. Now, this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, but when you go to the ayat of the Quran, there is a very, very particular punishment mentioned in Surah An-Nisa when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the killing of a Muslim or murder. And again, there are many, Surah An-Nisa, it is full of ahkam, rules and regulations, awamir and nawahi, commandments and prohibitions. So there are a lot of various scenarios that are mentioned and given, and there's a lot of sababun nuzul or shan nuzul related to many of the verses in that surah. And there were particular incidents that happened where someone had accepted Islam, but they were killed. When the incident came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, these ayat were revealed in Surah An-Nisa. But it is a type of golden rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, a general rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the ayat of the Quran, that killing a Muslim, regarding the level of killing a believer, a mu'min, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا, whosoever kills a believer intentionally, فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. Then for them will be eternal punishment in the hereafter. And that punishment will be in different forms. First of all, جَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا, they'll be put in hellfire eternally. وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ, they'll have the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on them perpetually. وَلَعَنَهُ, and they'll have curse, or they'll be cursed. وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا, and various types of punishments will be meted out to them one after the other. Here when we speak about the word muta'ammidan, there are a lot of details that the fuqaha have given. There are various scenarios and various ways where a believer may kill another believer. And generally this type of killing has to be where the person knows what they're doing. If it is by mistake or some other way that the person is killed, then that will be taken up by a court. And again, this is a very, very serious matter that will be dealt with in the courts, in Islamic courts. But when you come to the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a very, very serious crime, amongst the most serious of crimes. So killing a Muslim, a believer, it is amongst the most major sins. And the killer themselves will be put through capital punishment, and that is again under an Islamic government, under an Islamic court or a Muslim court. They will deal with the capital punishment for a murderer. But this hadith is a very, very stern warning that we should be very, very careful when abusing someone that is a Muslim. And we should be very, very careful in causing such harm to a Muslim that can kill them. That's again a very, very major sin. But even abusing a Muslim, whether it is verbal abuse or it is physical abuse, we should be very, very, very careful. It is a sin, it is sinful. This hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. We'll go to the next hadith, or hadith number 284, from the same chapter of Ikram al-Muslim, under the warnings of harming a Muslim. This hadith is in Abu Dawood. And this is also part of a hadith. It's part of a very lengthy hadith. عن أبي جري جابر بن سليم رضي الله عنه قال Abu Juray Jabir ibn Sulaym radiyallahu anhu, he reports, or he has reported. This is an amazing name. Some of the names of Sahaba radiyallahu anhu, subhanAllah, they're very, very beautiful names. So Abu Juray Jabir ibn Sulaym radiyallahu anhu, he narrates saying, قلت لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اعهد إليّ. He said that I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, i'had ilayya, that please give me some advice. He was asking for advice. Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, La tasubbanna ahadan. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave the advice, never abuse anyone. Whether it is verbal abuse or physical abuse, never abuse anyone. Qala, the Sahabi Abu Juray Jabir ibn Sulaym radiyallahu anhu, he says that فَمَا سَبَبْتُ بَعْدَهُ حُرًّا وَلَا عَبْدًا وَلَا بَعِيرًا وَلَا شَاةً. Sahabi says that after I heard this particular advice, I never abuse anyone. So for that, I have never abused a free man. وَلَا عَبْدًا, nor a slave. وَلَا بَعِيرًا, nor a camel. وَلَا شَاةً, or even a goat. Which means I stopped abusing anyone in my life. So we should be very, very careful, especially again, a lot of the abuse happens with verbal abuse. We should check our words. We should check, especially in emotional states. That is why when we become angry, the advice is to remain quiet. Just try and keep your tongue under control, because that is when majority of the abuse happens. So this Sahabi, when he asked for advice, the first advice he was given, and this is advice for all of us, La tasubbanna ahad. Do not abuse anyone. If we have this habit of abusing or have an abusive nature, we should control ourselves. We should stop abusing anyone or everyone. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then he further gave advice. The next advice. وَلَا تَحْقِرَنَّ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ وَأَن تُكَلِّمَ أَخَاكَ وَأَنْتَ مُنْبَسِطٌ إِلَيْهِ وَجْهُكَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ. The next advice that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave, وَلَا تَحْقِرَنَّ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ. Don't look down on any good deed. Don't consider any good deed to be insignificant. Any kind of ma'roof, al-ma'roof, any kind of righteous act, any good deed, never look down on it. Don't consider it as nothing. Never ever do that. وَلَا تَحْقِرَنَّ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ. Never look down or consider insignificant any good deed. وَأَن تُكَلِّمَ أَخَاكَ وَأَنْتَ مُنْبَسِطٌ إِلَيْهِ وَجْهَكَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْمَعْرُوفِ. Even speaking to your brother in a cheerful way. And here again, brother means your fellow Muslim. Speaking to them with being cheerful, having a smile on your face. That is also a ma'roof. Even that is a good deed. And there's a very, very beautiful indirect message here. That we should be cheerful people. Our nature should be that when we talk to someone, when we meet someone, when we interact with someone, people should leave that meeting feeling very comfortable with us. We should not have a demeanor where we mess up the mood of people even more. And again, this is also considering looking at a good deed, that even this is considered a good deed. To make people cheerful, this is also a very good deed. And we should never look down on that. Which means that if we find someone that has a good character and a cheerful way, and they make others happy, then we should not consider that something as negative, that this is some kind of negative quality this person has. Rather, we should be very, very careful in looking down on any kind of good deed. And the reasoning also is that on the Day of Judgment, every single good deed will count. No matter how small it'll be, it'll add weight. No matter how small it'll be for us in this world, on the Day of Judgment, it'll add weight to our balance or our scale, our good deeds. And that one good deed may be the tipping point for our admittance into Jannah. So never ever consider any good deed. Never look down on it. And we'll come back to the details of this. This is a very, very powerful statement. We'll go over these statements again. Some of these are very, very powerful. The next advice, which is mentioned in this hadith of Abu Dawood, وَرْفَعْ إِزَارَكَ إِلَى نِصْفِ السَّاقِ فَإِنْ أَبَيْتَ فَإِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ وَإِيَّاكَ وَإِزْبَادَ الْإِزَارِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنَ الْمُخِيلَةِ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمَخِيلَةِ. Keep your garments either halfway on your shin, and this is for men. It's not for women. For men, for a man, keep your garment halfway to your shin. And if not, at least keep it up to your ankles. وَإِيَّاكَ وَإِزْبَادَ الْإِزَارِ. But be very, very careful in dragging your garments with you or behind you. فَإِنَّهَا مِنَ الْمَخِيلَةِ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمَخِيلَةِ. Because dragging of the garments, this is from pride. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not like pride or proud people or proud. Does not like this nature of the pride that people have. And this is also, one is obviously the trousers, but also they wear the thobe. And we should be very, very careful if we are wearing a lengthy thobe and a very lengthy trousers. Make sure that it does not drag below the ankles for a man. For women, in ibadah, they should be fully covered, as this hukum is not for women, but for men. You should be very, very careful dragging your clothing behind you. And again, this is a situation in the 21st century, the dress of the 21st century. When we look at the various types of dresses in the Western culture, I'm not going to use the terms of what is considered Islamic dress and not Islamic. We have to understand that any dress that covers your awra and is full covering, this is considered Islamic dress. But you have the Western dress and you have the Eastern dress, and you have this dress that is aqrabu ila sunnah, closest to sunnah. The best dress is that dress which is closest to sunnah. Libasu taqwa dhalika khayr. The clothing of the muttaqeen, those that are muttaqi, those that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the best dress. Then after that, the next grade and the next grade. But when we get into some of the dresses even today, you will find in many of the dress codes, when it comes to wearing the pants, many of the pants drag below the ankles. And again, there are those that make the argument that this used to be a sign of pride, and it is not a sign of pride anymore. But remember, if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in many ahadith, many authentic narrations, he gave this prohibition that do not drag your clothing below your ankles, we should make it a point to listen. It may not just be, it's not just the pride. We may think that, okay, now in this culture, this is not out of pride that people are dragging their clothing. This is just the culture of the time. But if you look at the culture of the time and the dress of the time, we have to understand that dress code is generally, when it first starts, it starts by a group that the masses follow. There are particular individuals that people want to follow. They're famous, either celebrities or they are famous people in the world. And because of that fame, many people want to follow them. And if you look at those individuals, you'll find that many of them have this quality of pride and arrogance. And this pride is a very dangerous thing. So if they're also encouraging the type of dress where the dresses are dragging, and if you go back to the origin of where that dress comes from, it comes from people of pride. Some argue that they are the nice dress, the three-piece suits, and the suits are okay to dress in. And again, we're going to get out of the aspect of what is considered a non-Islamic dress. But what is clear is that those suits are worn by people in high positions. And many of them, when they want to make themselves presentable to the masses, they dress nicely. And again, their idea of nice is where the pants drag below the ankles. We should be very careful. And that is again appealing to people in authority, whether it is a business owner or a CEO or a manager, or the list of whatever other people in a higher authority may be. And many of them, if not all of them, the vast majority, many of them do have pride. Many of them do have arrogance. So we should be very careful in allowing ourselves to fall into something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave very clear, explicit instructions that do not let this type of dress be worn by you. And you'll find that the dress of the muttaqeen in general, those that are righteous, they try and keep their dress right above their ankle. It's respectable. And that is the way that a Muslim should dress. And again, we'll come back to this point in more detail. I was just pointing at it as this is very clear sign of those who have pride or who are proud. And again, go back to the origin, those that started that dress, or the vast majority of the crowd that this dress is representing. Then go and see who that crowd is. وإن امرؤ شتمك وعيرك بما يعلم فيك فلا تعيره بما تعلم فيه فإنما وبال ذلك عليه. فإنما وبال ذلك عليه. And if someone is abusing you, if someone is abusing you and cursing you, and they're doing that with something they know about you that will put you to shame, and they know something about you and they're using that to embarrass you in front of everyone, then you should not abuse them and embarrass them with something you know. It's a very unique advice from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Sometimes we get in a quarrel or we're with some people and someone out of anger or out of emotion, they start shaming us and embarrassing us in front of individuals. And they're doing it with things they know about us, very true things. And sometimes in turn, we become angry and we respond that, yeah, but you're also like this. And we also embarrass them. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is giving a very, very clear instruction here. That if someone is embarrassing you with something they know about you, don't retort back. Don't use something that you know about them. Don't embarrass them with it. إِنَّمَا وَبَعْدُ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْهِ. Because then the burden of that will fall on them. They're trying to embarrass you and they break your heart. All that sin will fall on them. But if you return and you go back and you abuse them also, now you're putting yourself into sin also. And there's also, again, the aspect of trust. Someone abuses us in a crowd and they know many things about us, we'll never trust that person again. But if we return back and we start abusing the person also and shaming the person with things we know about them, at least in public, we're hurting our own trust. People will say, look at this person. He knew something about someone and he just exposed it so easily. So we should be very, very careful with our emotions. We should not just go back and abuse the person and shame the person in public like that. We should be very, very careful with this. Again, the sin of that will fall on them. وَهُوَ بَعْضُ الْحَدِيثِ. All of this is part of a hadith, Rawahu Abu Dawood, from Abu Dawood. And it's amazing how many beautiful advices are mentioned here. We'll just go over some of these advices in more detail. The first advice that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave was, لَا تَسُبَّنَّ أَحَدٍ. Do not curse anyone. Do not abuse anyone. And this is a very, very unique instruction because sometimes we abuse someone and they also start abusing us back. We're only hurting ourselves. And this goes beyond just abusing an individual. This Sahabi, Abu Jurayj Jabir ibn Sulaim radiyallahu anhu, he made it very clear that after I heard this advice to do not abuse anyone, I did not abuse a free man or a slave or a camel or even a goat. I didn't abuse anyone. I never abused anyone. But what is unique about the ayat of the Quran is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a very particular command, in this case, a very particular prohibition in the Quran. وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the mu'mineen and all of us in the ayat of the Quran, do not abuse the idols or false gods of other people. Because in response, they will turn around and abuse. They'll abuse or curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. And indirectly, we have become, or we end up becoming, the means of them abusing or cursing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Na'udhu billah, la'iyadu billah. So this goes very, very deep. Do not abuse someone's religion. Do not make fun of someone's religion. This is very, very clear in the Quran, a very clear prohibition. وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُمْ ثم إلى ربهم مرجعهم فينبئهم بما كانوا يعملون. Very clear in the ayat of the Quran. Do not curse or abuse the idols of others. In turn, they'll turn around and they'll abuse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They'll even abuse the Muslims. كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُم. This is how we have made beautiful for every nation their actions. Just these nations, all of them believe that they're right. Even though they're misguided, shaitan has really pushed them in that direction so far that their hearts are attached to these idols. Their hearts are attached to this shirk, to the shirk, to the kufr, disbelief. And they believe this is what is right. And if we turn around and we start abusing that and making fun of them or mocking them, the only thing we're doing is, first of all, that will never become a means of them accepting Islam. They will never get guidance like this. Rather, they'll turn around and abuse our deen. We should be very, very careful. This command is very clear for all of us. In this case, this prohibition is very clear. Do not abuse the religions of others. For them, their actions are beautified. And also, there's another message in this ayah also. ثُمَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ مَرْجِعُهُمْ. A time is coming and they'll be returned back to their Lord. Everyone will be returned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيُنَبِّئُهُمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will inform them regarding all of their actions. Which means we're not to judge people in this world. Don't go around judging people. That is not da'wah. Real da'wah is that with wisdom and beautiful advice, we encourage someone to come to Islam. No matter how much they abuse us or they hurt us or they make fun of us or even make fun of our deen, we're not given this permission to turn around and do the same to them in any way. That is not da'wah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was giving da'wah to the kuffar and disbelievers, how much they abused him, how much they made fun of him, they called him names. And he never turned around and called them names back or made fun of them or made fun of their idols in any way. So we should be very, very careful. And we should understand this important point that when we're told by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that do not abuse anyone, don't go and abuse someone's ideas, don't abuse someone's religion, don't abuse someone's parents. There's another hadith that is coming very, very clear that the worst of people are those who abuse their own parents. Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they said, who would abuse their own parents or curse their parents? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said that person who abuses and curses someone else's parents, that other person will in turn abuse a person's father or abuse a person's mother. This is what happens when we start cursing and we start abusing without even realizing it. That, the famous saying, what goes around comes around. So if we go around abusing someone's parents, they'll turn around and abuse our parents. If we abuse someone's deen or religion, they'll turn around and abuse our deen. And what are we doing indirectly? So we should be very, very careful when we give da'wah. Never make someone more hostile than they already are. Rather, with da'wah should be hikmah and wisdom, maw'idah, beautiful advice. ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. The command in the ayat of the Quran, ادع إلى سبيل ربك, invite people to the path of your Lord. بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة, with deep wisdom and beautiful advice. وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن, and if you argue with them with that which is best. Don't try to go towards things that will make them more hostile and even build more hatred and animosity in their hearts against the Muslims and against the deen of Islam. We should be very, very wise in our da'wah. So this is the first part of the advice. Inshallah, we'll go in more detail. This hadith is a very, very beautiful hadith, very detailed hadith. Inshallah, we'll try to cover the details. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and give all of us the tawfiq to practice His deen. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.